most abortion survivors do not have medical records, but I do have my medical records, and so I know through them that Ruth's abortion took 5 days.
That's a long time. Quote, "This baby was born prematurely to a 19-year-old unmarried mother. She was estimated to be about 18 weeks pregnant. On August 24th, saline infusion for an abortion was done, but was unsuccessful."
There were so many things that I never told my parents, and I thought I would never tell the world. And my first book was very vulnerable. I can remember wrestling with editors who were like, "There's more to your story." I'm like, nope, pretty sure I've talked about it all. What I didn't want to talk about is my eating disorder, the alcohol abuse, the relationship choices I was making in a place of pain at the age of 14 that I never thought I would face at that age. You know, God really saved me from myself. And I can remember waking up one day and just the continuous message was like, "Man, Melissa, I have more in store for you than this. Are you willing to accept that?" And I remember a day waking up and forgiving my birth parents. You know, the message that I just felt was their life was forever changed by this too. This isn't just you. And so that's what really put me on the path to then looking for them and wanting them to know that they are forgiven.
Melissa Ohden, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's my honor. Thank you.
We had a great dinner last night with my wife. Yeah.
It was a great dinner.
Yeah. And I'm glad I got to know you a little bit. Melissa, you can fill in some of the gaps here, but I wanted to let my audience know that you are the founder and executive director or president of Abortion Survivor Network. And we're going to pull up the website here. Go ahead, Kevin, abortionsurvivor.org. And I wanted to throw this out immediately before we get into your incredible story. And by the way, just as like a little hint here, like you were an aborted baby. You were aborted. It was like I was telling somebody here in the office, and they said, "Hey, what's Melissa's story?" I was like, "Well, she was an aborted baby." And he's like, "That's a way to start a Monday morning."
It's a way to start a life.
A life. It's a way to start a life. Yeah, I mean, but every encounter you have, and you tell these people, it must be like, what? I mean, it's just shocking to the system for someone like me to hear, you know. But we're going to get into that. The whole episode here is going to be talking about your incredible story, which I got bits and pieces of last night at dinner with my wife. But I wanted to start by showing everyone your website here and just encourage them to go to this website, financially support Abortion Survivors Network so that, you can continue to help other people who are aborted. And as you're going to hear, folks, there's thousands of you. There's thousands of you that we only know about,
right.
And tens of thousands more that we don't know about. So that's kind of the incredible thing. So anything about this website or just getting people to go there, how do they donate? They go, there's probably donate buttons at
yes.
on the I see a donate button over there. Anything else we should know about this here?
Well, I mean, what I love about this website is it allows people to see the faces of folks who were aborted and survived. And you're right, it is a shock to the system, and it should be.
Yeah.
And I think, you and I were talking about semantics, and I think, first and foremost, that's the hardest corner for people to turn because they go, whoa, wait a minute. What do you mean you were aborted and you survived? Abortion means, finish the sentence. What does abortion mean?
Who terminated a pregnancy.
Right. And that's like the biggest step that people have to face because you can see the wheels in their head turning going, if someone survives in an abortion, then that means abortion is taking a human life every time.
Every time, yeah.
Except when it doesn't.
When it doesn't. Yeah.
And so, I think when I think about abortion and the pain of it and the injustice of it, I think we all can recognize, Conor, that it's been such an issue, not only because of the spiritual warfare component of it, just how evil it is, but when people are left lifeless and voiceless and faceless, then you can continue that injustice in our world, right? We all can think of something that has happened that forever changes us, right? You hear someone's story and you go, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be the same after this. Well, when abortion does what it does, and then our culture has taken the lie of abortion and spun it as a right, then we get to this place where it's continued. And so literally looking into the faces of people who are incredible human beings, right? They're somebody's child, they're somebody's, often their spouse, their grandparents. This is the humanity of every preborn child.
Yeah.
And so that's what I love, is that our site allows people to come face to face with people whose very existence does cause us to kind of take a step back. But on our website too, people can read through statistics. I mean, I'm sure when you were even saying, oh, this happens thousands of times a year.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm understating it. I'm probably understating it,
Right, because people are like, well, why is there an organization for that? Aren't you like the only one that happened to? No.
Let's get into like you telling your story. So if I said, how do you tell your story? Go all the way back. Very often, by the way, it's like my own little weird thing when I'm talking to somebody, like interviewing them for a job or meeting somebody. And I say, almost kind of as a funny thing, okay, once upon a time you were born, then what happened? I very often say that, trying to get somebody's life story. That's a very weird way to start the conversation with
there, Conor? I mean,
once upon a time you were born. You weren't supposed to be born,
right?
But you were born. So take us. How do you start the story and just go from there?
Yeah, and I mean, I think we talked about this at dinner. I think our world would be a different place if people had to have that discussion with themselves on a regular basis of, right, what is your origin story, right? I mean, in today's cultural terms, that's what people would say. But, what would happen if people actually had to recognize how other people felt about them and the impact of that? I mean, that is what kind of exists beneath this whole conversation about abortion. Yes, everybody's experience is unique and different, and the circumstances that women find themselves under, right, can be very different. But we know that we also see trends in terms of like the psychosocial impact that lead women to abortion, right, that make them vulnerable to it. But at the end of the day, when I enter into people's stories like mine, I start to learn the difference between you and I is that someone made a decision about whether I would live or die based on those circumstances. And in any other term, right, if we were talking about any other issue in our society, people would call that what? Eugenics, maybe?
Well, yeah, sure. Yeah.
We don't like to use the word murder when we talk about abortion, right, in a lot of circles. But by any other name, what would we call it when we decide who should live or who should die? And that's what I have learned to live with. And it's not pleasant for people. Abortion is not palatable. And I think, when we think about that 8-year-old survivor I met recently, the greatest obstacle for her in her life is going to be living in a society that has been so impacted by abortion that it has become the norm and something that is championed in terms of policy, right? Something that is fought tooth and nail for, that, billions of dollars is pumped into. The greatest threat to her well-being long-term is our culture. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the greatest reasons why our work is so important, because she may have survived an abortion, and that's an uphill struggle initially, but then the long-term struggle is, how do you learn to live? Mm-hmm. And, for me, I mean, I'll age myself really quickly. Sometimes I forget how old I am, 48, which is important from a historical context. knowing Roe versus Wade in 1973, ultimately led to then what should have been my death. And, behind every abortion survivor, Conor, is the woman whose abortion didn't go the way that she planned.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's sort of hard for sometimes even people in the pro-life movement to wrestle with, of like, well, what do you mean the abortion didn't go as planned? Like, shouldn't she just be grateful that it didn't work? Maybe. Maybe someday. But when women's abortions don't go the way they plan, there's shock and there's anger, there's fear, there's uncertainty, and that doesn't go away. And so that's what brought me into this world, right? Like the day that I was born, I wasn't supposed to be.
Right.
And I know a lot about my birth mother now. And, every abortion survivor, not only are there circumstances of the type of procedure and what gestation and what the impact of it was and, who they're raised by, it can be different from person to person. It's much more diverse than the pro-life movement even understood it to be until I came along. But, what I do know is that it's messy. And I think I'm one of those few abortion survivors where, really God has blessed me with a lot of details. And not just for my benefit, but I think for the world's benefit, to say, hey, this is what it looks like, and bring about such reconciliation and restoration in it. But, back in 1977, nobody ever could have foresaw that this is what it would look like. My birth mother, fits most statistics when it comes to abortion. She was 19. She was a college student. She wasn't married to my biological father, but, now I know they were engaged. They had dated all throughout high school into college. And, I really do think they were probably one another's great love. And I think there's a lot of Ruth and Elliot stories out there in the world of people who are in love and then something happens and you meet that fork in the road, right? Of what direction are we going to go? And I think our culture sends those I think they're explicit, not just implicit messages of, right? If you are in college, you're not married, whatever it is, you need to choose that path, because you're not going to have any other path if you don't choose that abortion path. And I think the hard part that families need to face, and I really believe our churches need to face, Conor, is we also have really well-intentioned families who have a lot of secrets about coercion when it comes to abortion.
And that's what Ruth went through, is coercion, right?
It is. I now know that she really did not know for months that she was pregnant with me. And part of that was, she was an athlete. She was training. So she missed periods, right? It wasn't out of the ordinary for her. And, she obviously, I think, was in a lot of denial as well. She had a very, commanding mother. She knew what was expected of her as a 19-year-old college student. And so I think she was in denial. I think she was probably really scared of what was going to happen when her family found out that she was pregnant. And, her mom sort of figured it out. She was starting to have some physical signs of that. And in August of 1977, she was confronted by her mother, my grandmother, who was an OBGYN nurse. I mean, it makes sense that she could sort of figure out what was going on. And, within days, Ruth and Elliot were sat down by my grandmother, and, we're told that there was going to be no choice to be had. She was going to take care of it. And, there's been parts of my life where obviously there's still a lot of pain for me that will never go away when you know what should have been the outcome for your life. But, honestly, at this stage in my life, my greatest pain is to think about Ruth and Elliot at 19 and 21 years of age and know that it shouldn't have been that way. Mm-hmm. There were family members who would have allowed Ruth to live with them, right? There were so many other paths that they could have taken. And I know that our family experience isn't that unique. People whisper their stories to me everywhere I go. And, I think that's what restores a culture of life at the end of the day is looking in the mirror at ourselves individually and as families to say, what have we done? Mm-hmm. What have we said or what haven't we said? What did we do or what did we not do? And that's hard. I think it's really easy to justify, right? Oh, it had to be that way. I loved them so much. I knew that, right, they wouldn't have had the life that they wanted if they wouldn't have had that abortion at the age of 19. Those are the lies we tell ourselves. And within days, all the lies began. Ruth was forced into St. Luke's Hospital in Sioux City, Iowa, and underwent a saline infusion abortion. And when I say forced, I don't share a lot of details out of respect for a lot of people, but she was not given any other option. Back then she should have gone before a therapeutic committee to talk about why she needed an abortion, if that was what she was walking out as her choice. But it wasn't her choice. So she didn't go before a therapeutic committee. And, that burn victim that you saw once was probably the survivor of the same type of procedure that I am, that was forced upon Ruth. So they would remove some amniotic fluid, so there would be space for this toxic salt solution. So then they would insert that saline, and then the child would be poisoned and scalded to what was meant to be their death. On our website, I think one of the most powerful resources is called the Dreaded Complication series. You probably have never read it. No. I would say most people haven't. It was through a couple of authors back in about 1981, and the Philadelphia Inquirer ran this series. It was up for a Pulitzer Prize. And I'll warn you, it's a tough read because it details, in particular, saline infusion abortions back in that time period. And not only the impact on the baby, right? These piles of blackened babies in hospitals who are being aborted. And yes, many surviving for a period of time, but also talked about the pain of the women going through it, the nurses, right? And what that was like for them. And so, this was a very quick corner, I think, to turn in our society, to go from Roe in 1973 to then, right, all of this starting to happen. And so I'm very grateful that they were willing to document it.
So in that procedure, there's some kind of saline that it's some kind of chemical that burns the baby. So when you came out, or when you were still in utero, were you burned? Because you don't look burned now. So I mean, like usually like a 3rd degree burn scars over. So help me with that.
Right. Yeah. And so when if people go and they look it up, you'll find that they call babies who are aborted that way the red-skinned or the candy-appled babies, because it would turn the skin bright red and peel it away as it moved internally into the organs. And so usually that procedure lasted about 3 days. The child, if they were quote unquote fortunate enough, their life was ended within about the first 24 hours. And then the next up to 48 hours were spent inducing labor. So the intent was, of course, then for that deceased child, the successful abortion, to be delivered in the final step of it.
I mean, so I can't get my mind around, like, if you were going to kill a baby to terminate a pregnancy, why burn it to death? We're talking about burning a baby to death, right?
Why would you dismember them?
I know. It's like, I can't ask the question without sounding like an idiot. But I mean, from what you hear is like people that are burned at the stake, like burning is like the worst possible way to go. It's like the worst, and they would be burned. And so basically their death would take a day. I assume the baby's in total agony for however long until it dies.
Right. And I mean, that's
what I'm hearing. It's like setting a baby on fire and leaving it there for a day. Right. What? Like, why was that procedure even created? I mean, it seems like an unnecessary, you can't say anything without sounding like an idiot, but like, it sounds like an unnecessary, prolonged death versus killing it quickly. I'm saying it. I can't even say it's a baby. It's not an it. Gosh.
Well,
this is so hard to talk about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no. I mean, when I told you I'm kind of the walking encyclopedia of a lot of information.
But you see what I'm saying? Why burn versus dismember? That's a better way to say it, I guess.
Right. Yeah. And without, going too deeply into it, installation methods like that were the most common method back then. But again, what I've learned through our population of survivors is there were precursors to the abortion pills that we have today. So, I have folks who were surviving abortions before Roe versus Wade, and, mom's general practitioner was, giving different drugs to induce labor. So, things like methotrexate and things like that we start to continue to see used in different ways. But all that to say, they've worked at things to perfect the method of abortion. And, for me, one of the most demeaning things that I encounter as a leader in this area is that when I go and testify, say before Congress, and I have I don't know, maybe close to 10 times. I don't really count.
Wow.
One of the most demeaning things is the typical response is there is no response on one particular side of the aisle, usually, to me, right? Yeah. And the last time it happened was back in 2024 at a committee hearing. And they passed along a note at the end of the hearing, and somebody read it out loud. And it said, for the record, saline infusion abortions are not performed routinely anymore. What's the intention of that statement? To dismiss me? That I'm not relevant to this conversation because it's not performed routinely anymore? Or is it to, what they're actually doing is they're showing their hand, which is to say, we're just much better at it, right? We have much more effective ways to make sure that people like Melissa don't show up for hearings like this. I mean, that's what that means.
We're much better at killing than we used to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was a detour on the procedure. Sorry, but I don't know why I'm curious about this. But so is it likely that when you were born that you had severe burns?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely had some pink skin. People would not know if they passed me on the street that I suffered the kind of things that I did. Most abortion survivors do not have medical records. And, that is hard for survivors to face because we have a lot of questions. And, women often don't have their abortion records. That's part of what we've helped mothers with as well, is they're trying to find out more about their own procedure, and they're not allowed to be given that. And, in a world that wants to say, well, it's healthcare. Well, why can't they get their abortion records if it's healthcare? And if it was just healthcare, why can't the abortion survivor have the record of what was done to them? It just, right, it doesn't take long for us to go down that rabbit trail of none of this makes sense. But I do have my medical records, and so I know through them that Ruth's abortion took 5 days.
That's a long time.
It is a long time. And one of the common fights that I find in our culture is when we talk about born alive infants, and we can talk about all of that later, but born alive infants and babies feeling pain in the womb, right? People kind of go crazy about that of you guys know they're not feeling pain. Well, then why do we give anesthesia to babies in utero who are having surgery?
Yeah.
And so we know that. I mean, there's some great studies. People can study up on the amount of pain that babies in the womb experience. And so, being poisoned and scalded over 5 days, the doctors have been clear. I was probably in an extreme amount of pain.
Yeah, I would think so.
Which is why I've lived my life. I told you guys at dinner, I've always felt like there was a hum. There was something in my body that I couldn't ever quite quiet. And the older I get, the more I can recognize that it's probably just been physical chronic pain for so long that I've never known
If you always
anything
had
else.
it, you don't even recognize it as pain necessarily, but it's there.
Right. Right. And my
Wow.
pain receptors have been probably very much thrown off. I, for better or worse, I have a really high tolerance for pain. I sort of wish that I didn't.
Mm.
But I think that was probably a natural response in my body to survive what I did. But, during those 5 days, I was poisoned and scalded. They kept trying to induce Ruth's labor, and they weren't successful. And, I now know that they started to fear that she was going to lose her life because it was taking so long. The abortionist wrote on the medical records, he estimated that she was about 18 to 20 weeks pregnant with me. But here's a shocker alert. Abortionists don't often provide adequate exams. And I hear that time and time again with women still today whose, abortions are not successful and they carry a pregnancy. And I hear it through other abortion survivors of, no, right? There was no adequate exam.
So back then in 1977, could an 18-week-old baby survive like in the NICU? I mean, now I don't know. It seems to be getting earlier and earlier,
It
right?
does. It is getting earlier and earlier.
So now isn't like 20 weeks where you got
Right.
a pretty good chance of surviving now, and like 18 is slim, but maybe,
Right.
I don't know. In 1977, could an 18-week-old baby survive?
I think medical professionals would say probably not. Right.
And
The
so is
chances would
that
be
why
really
they may
slim.
have said 18 to 20 weeks? Because they wanted to pick something that was like pre-viable.
Sure.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we need to face that as well, right? Of how often are those kind of games, for lack of a better word, played,
Right.
right? When people are like, no, late-term abortions don't happen. Well,
Yeah.
what if the paperwork is just fudged a little?
Fudged.
What if women don't know how far along they really are? What if abortionists aren't providing adequate exams to assess how far along a woman is?
So how far along probably was Ruth?
The fact that I weighed almost 3 pounds, I was 2 pounds, 14 ounces when I was accidentally born alive that 5th day. A neonatologist remarked in my medical records, he estimated I was probably 31 weeks.
Yeah, wow.
And, I see the hand of God in that. I'm forever grateful, whether it was, intentional that my exact gestational age was hidden because it kept me alive. That's neither here nor there. It doesn't change the fact of what they intended.
Yeah, sure, right. Hey guys, real quick, we noticed 80% of you that watch the episodes are not subscribed. So please do me the favor and subscribe and hit the bell for notification. That helps you get the content, but it also helps this amazing stuff get spread to other people just like you. Thanks for your help. Now let's dive back in. So I think probably a lot of people, as I was last night and kind of still am, it's sort of like, maybe I'm just a moron, but how did it take 5 days? Why did this take 5 days? I have a picture in my head of an abortion. They drive in.
Right.
They get out of the Planned Parenthood building. They go in. They come out a couple hours later. It's done. What is this 5 days thing? Help me with that.
Right. And it shouldn't have lasted that long. It should have been in and out within about 3 days.
But even 3 days, I don't get
Right.
that. I thought it was like 3 hours.
Well, and again, when we're talking about abortion, especially in today's world, and people are saying, well, women need to have abortions because of their medical condition. And I'm like, hey, if your life's in danger, are you going to undergo an abortion procedure that's lasting 3 days, 5 days? No, you're going to induce labor, right, with the intent of, hopefully saving both woman and child, right, having a C-section, whatever it is. Like, man, folks, let's think critically about some of these things. But in reality, right, late-term abortions typically take a couple of days. They're multi-step procedures because
the later or the longer it takes to do.
Right. The baby is large.
Yeah.
Some of our abortion survivors, I can think of someone in particular named Jennifer. Her mom, her biological mom, went in for an abortion in Illinois. The abortionist was going to perform a vacuum aspiration, which is where essentially you're sucking
Right.
the baby out. Abortionist starts the procedure, and Jennifer's head is too big.
Mm-hmm.
Mom was much further along gestationally, and so had to stop that procedure, which is why Jennifer is alive today. But he suggested, hey, you can come back. You can have a different abortion procedure, but it's going to cost you more money.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't have the money to do it. These are the things that a lot of people haven't thought about, and for good reason, right? We shouldn't have to think about them.
Yeah, yeah.
But this is kind of the underbelly of abortion that changes things.
So it takes 5 days. Then you are born. Tell us what happens and what your birth mother's was thinking happened, and then what actually happened.
A lot of people think of an abortion survivor. First of all, people think of an abortion survivor as a woman, right, who had an abortion. That's kind of like the default response of, oh, you had an abortion and you survived it. No. We're talking about babies who survive abortions. That's what an abortion survivor is. But then when people think about abortion survivor, Conor, then they sort of think of this, right, my circumstance, which is, right, it's a late-term abortion, whether people know that or not, and the baby is born alive in the final step of the abortion procedure. They think that's the epitome of a born alive infant. And we tend to have political conversations about abortion survivors in that respect. That is still a vulnerable subset of our survivor population, yes. However, in today's world, right, babies are surviving abortion pills at first and second trimester gestation, right, looking mainly at first trimester. And women can go weeks or months before knowing that they're still pregnant with that baby. And so there's a different experience to that baby, that abortion survivor being born. But back then, right, it happened like this, which was, right, an abortion procedure lasting days. Then you induce labor, and the deceased child is supposed to be delivered, but it's a born alive infant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people have a lot of questions of like, then what happens?
Yeah.
Right. Then what happens? Are they immediately provided medical care? Are they laid aside? What happens? And I can't speak about what happens to every survivor. I wish we knew. I wish that I didn't have to wrestle with that question. We deserve to know it shouldn't be happening in the first place, all of those things. But I know that at St. Luke's Hospital, babies who survived abortions were often put in the utility closet, placed in buckets of formaldehyde to be picked up later as medical waste. And I know that because the nurses who did it to other babies like me have apologized to me.
Dang. Oh, my gosh.
And
do you forgive them?
Oh, gosh, absolutely. You know, I've said you don't need to apologize to me. But on behalf of children who can never offer their forgiveness or their love back to them, I offer that.
Wow.
And, you know, there's something incredibly healing about that.
Yeah. I'm sitting there thinking that's like the greatest possible thing on the planet anyone can give those nurses.
Yeah.
What better thing could they ever receive? You're able to give those people something that really no one else is able to give them.
Right. And
because I mean, even if they're Catholic and they get absolution from a priest and God Almighty, that's wonderful. But to hear, I forgive you from like one of the victims,
yeah,
it's irreplaceable.
And that's part of what people coming face to face with us also means, right? There is a level of healing for the women who have had abortions that were successful, the men who are impacted by it, the abortionists, the former abortionists, right? Dr. Prokalski, we were talking about at dinner last night, right? Sitting there and holding his hand and knowing what he did in the past. I love him. I don't ever look at him and think, oh, right, there's a former abortionist.
When he's become, just so for people know, he was my wife's doctor when we lived in D.C. I guess he delivered there first. But he became a great pro-life champion. And, so he has a special practice where only certain types of people go to him now, So, but he performed abortions in the past. So that's a remarkable conversion. Anyway, so back to your event. They would usually dispose of living babies in the utility closet and
Right.
in buckets to be carried off as medical waste.
Right.
That's not what happened to you.
That's not what happened to me. I don't know where I initially was laid aside. From what we can gather, it was just there in a hospital room. I, was initially laid aside and not provided medical care. There was a demand made to leave me to die. And
Who would have made that demand? The grandmother?
it was my grandmother.
Okay.
My mom and dad were told that it was my abortionist, and that would make sense. But my grandmother forced the abortion. She monitored it at the hospital, and she came face to face with me that day. And I was her firstborn grandchild. And yet she told the nurses that she helped supervise to leave me to die. And, Conor, I think that when I found that out, really that was in about the last almost, a little over 10 years ago that I found that out. And I can tell you where I was standing when I read that comment from a family member. And, I knew that there was something really, really bad. Our story is full of a lot of really painful pieces, but I was thinking, after all of the painful things and secrets that our family faced, and there's something else that you guys don't want to tell me, like, this has got to be pretty bad. And so when it finally came out, it just felt like the wind was knocked out of me. But at the same time, it wasn't super surprising. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Well, it's attempted murder twice.
Right.
So it's like you shouldn't be really that surprised that they try a second time if the first time doesn't work. But it is still rather shocking that the survival and being able to see you wrapped up in a blanket or whatever didn't shock the conscience and didn't invoke a conversion.
Right.
They tried again.
Right.
And that is it shocking? I don't know. You're trying to understand a sick person's mind who tried to kill a baby to begin with. But it's attempted murder 2 times in a row. Right. That's what it is.
Well, and that's what abortion has done.
I'm sorry. I don't need to get amped up about it, but I'm like, it just pisses me off hearing about it. Gosh.
And it should, right? It should prick our consciences in such a way that we're like, no, wait a minute. This is an injustice. And it doesn't mean that we don't care about the women, right? We do. We want better for them than what abortion does to them and their child. I want better for the medical system than for them to be performing abortions, right? And dealing with the aftermath of that and the mental gymnastics and the impact of it all, right?
Did your grandmother, since she was an OBGY and nurse,
right?
So did she participate in abortions through her career? And so was she desensitized to this?
That's one of those things I don't think I will ever know. I suspect that it probably happened a lot. And again, I think that's what we have to face is, when we're talking about late-term abortion in general, right, you can have, folks on one side of the hospital working to save a 21-week preemie. And then you can have another part of the hospital where they're working to actively end the life of that 21-week-old. And what's the defining?
Does the same nurse and same doctor work on both sides of the aisle there sometimes?
Yeah.
That's really strange.
And
you got to go home at night confused.
And what's the difference between those 2 babies, Conor?
Right.
Oh.
The intention of its parent, and that's it.
Right. Or the medical system who, is making that decision. Just at the end of the day, right, that's part of what we have to face. And, as hard as it was to learn that it was my grandmother, at the same time, Conor, I think, it has been a very refining experience for me to recognize that that's what abortion has done to so many people. And my grandmother's just sort of one example of it. And, it was a great opportunity for me to once again see people's humanity and still love them, right? Love them in the face of that. Love her knowing that, and this is going to sound probably pretty terrible, but I live with it, knowing that she probably never would have loved me the same way, which was unconditionally, right? Regardless of circumstance. And she probably never knew, right? My grandmother probably never knew that I have that sort of love for her. But I'm okay with that. because it's what it's done for me. It's created that space for me to be who I am and to be loving and forgiving and be able to share the story. And I think that's a lesson for all of us. Everybody has somebody in their life who has done them wrong. We're not going to get through this life without it. And then the question is, how do we live our lives in such a way that we can live with it?
So you're wrapped up, you're put in a room, the instructions are given to let you die. And then that doesn't happen. Somebody takes you, puts you somewhere. Do they put you in the NICU? Like what happened? Where'd you go from there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of the lucky ones to have been born alive at a hospital. If I would have been born alive at a Planned Parenthood, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't be here today.
Right.
They wouldn't have had the capabilities.
Right.
So I am...
Does this mean, though, that there was like some kind of heroic nurse that
There
sees
was.
this and says, I can't let this happen?
Yeah.
Somebody had to buck the system a little bit.
Right. Yeah, sometimes people will go, what are you so upset about? The fact that you're alive tells us that you were provided medical care. Yeah, except it took a heroic person to defy the orders to leave me to die. And so, my mom and dad were told over the years that it was a couple of nurses. And, there's a lot that I will probably never truly know. But what I do know is that one tall, blonde nurse rushed me off to the NICU, believing that if people found out the abortion had failed and the baby had lived, that maybe, just maybe, they could provide medical care that would sustain my life. And I now know that my grandmother followed her in and told the other nurses to never tell Ruth that I had survived the abortion.
Oh, yeah.
And the only reason why I know that, Conor, is because there was a 21-year-old nurse at the time named Jan working that day. Jan helped care for me for 21 days along with other nurses, and she never forgot about me. As her children grew up, she wondered what my life had been like if I had continued to live, right? What my life had been like, and she came looking for me.
How?
When I started to share this story publicly, she started to piece it together. She's pro-life. I mean, that moment changed her life. It changed her career. She knew that she never wanted to be in those kind of circumstances again. And she stayed in the medical field, but she found different ways to work. And so, even though there are so many abortion survivors, so few share their story publicly. So when we do, right, those people who were a part of it, if they're paying attention, they're going to start to see us. And so Jan came into my life after my first book, You Carried Me, came out. And
right here, available on Amazon or
wherever books are sold.
Right.
And so when that book came out, she had read it and she realized then that there were things that I was starting to know. She knew of me before that. And she said, I knew at the time that I knew things that you didn't know. And so it wasn't until I started to share more that she realized I was starting to learn more things, and she came into my life. And so she's met my mom and dad. She met Ruth.
Look at that. You got part of your medical records in the book.
I do.
That's really, it's almost like a detective story.
Yeah, it really is.
So back up. Sorry. You're out there making public addresses, and you're probably referencing the hospital that you were born in, and you have this pro-life nurse who remembers you, but somehow sees you somewhere and sees that you, or hears you talk about the hospital, and she's like, wait a minute, I worked there.
Yeah.
How old is she? Oh, 77. I was there.
Yeah.
And she connects these dots.
Oh, yeah.
And then contacts you?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Never a dull moment.
Wow.
And she's not the only one. I mean, I have a nurse volunteer who held me once at the University of Iowa hospitals where I was sent to after I was 21 days old. And this nurse held me and asked what my name was. And, here I am, weeks turning into months old, and I don't have a name.
Yeah, right.
And she's saying, why doesn't this baby have a name?
You don't have a mom.
Right. And the nurses told her my story. The nurses gave me a name. My name was Katie Rose at the University of Iowa hospitals.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's kind of awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
and
wow.
And I think,
of course they did. I mean, because you're a human.
That means something.
Yeah, it means something. But do you ever think of yourself as Katie Rose? I mean, you were raised as Melissa, but that's amazing. That's amazing.
It is. Well, and I think, again, things that maybe other people take for granted.
Well, you're a convert.
I am.
That's a whole nother thing that you're a convert to Catholicism. Did you any chance you chose like Catherine as like your confirmation name or something because of Katie? I don't know.
I mean, it probably coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Yeah, that would have been a good one.
Faustina for me.
Oh, that's good.
That was part of my conversion.
Okay.
But right. I mean, from, I'll go down that tangent. Yeah. Something interesting about my adoptive parents, I now know that my dad used to sneak out. So I was raised Methodist. My parents are still people of great faith, but my dad used to sneak out of the house and go to midnight mass as
serious?
A teenager. And I was like, who does that?
Right. Well, somebody who God has his hand on,
Yeah.
That's wow, amazing. Okay. So Jane, the nurse, is helping take care of you for, did you say 21 days?
Yeah, Jan at that hospital, 21 days. So, when I was rushed off to the NICU, the prognosis for my life was quite poor, right? The doctors didn't know how long I would live, what my life would continue to look like. I presented, you can read it in parts of my medical records, I presented with so much distress that they thought I had a fatal heart defect. That's what being poisoned and scalded for 5 days is going to do to you. I suffered from, respiratory problems, seizures for a period of time. They indicated that I would likely suffer from, being blind, deaf. They just really did not know. And, I'm forever grateful to that nurse who put her job on the line that day. Yeah. I mean, conscience rights, when we talk about that related to abortion, that is important. We shouldn't have to have these conversations, but it really is important.
Can I read this?
Yeah, go for it.
I think it's kind of amazing to read this little snippet, and you could fill in some of the gaps from your medical record in 1977. It has your date of birth. Why are stuff blacked out? Like
that's protecting
you just wanted, you did that. You wanted to black out the doctor's name, the pediatrician's name,
my birth parents' names.
Yeah, phone number, religion. What religion were they? Do you know? Maybe you don't want to say, but you blacked it out. So
not Catholic.
Okay. Quote, this baby was born prematurely to a 19-year-old unmarried mother. According to this mother's hospital record, her last menstrual period was 5/1/77. However, she reportedly stated that she had no period in March or April. She was estimated to be about 13 weeks. Does that say 13 or 18?
I think it was 18.
18 weeks pregnant. On August 24th, here's the point. Saline infusion for an abortion was done, but was unsuccessful. On August 27th, Pitocin drip was started. It was also repeated on August 28th. Her bag of water broke about 6:30 p.m. Pitocin drip was continued on the 29th. The baby was delivered spontaneously in bed by a nurse. Apgar at 1 minute was, and then it's cut off. So you don't have the rest of it. But you're like, it's just, I want to read that because you were able to obtain these medical records from St. Luke's Medical Center. It's like detective work. So you dug all this stuff up and you're able to gather some stuff. I'm sure you got more records than that, but it's kind of amazing to me.
Yeah, that's one of them. And in those medical records, I mean, there's one really interesting piece on another form. It lists out a complication of pregnancy for Ruth as a saline infusion. And I'm like, boy, isn't that like the most honest thing I've ever seen about abortion? It complicates a pregnancy.
Right.
But yeah, through those medical records, it details not only the abortion, but also then what health issues, I was facing at the time. By the time I was about 3 months old and was at the University of Iowa hospitals, I was healthy and large enough at 5 pounds to go home to my adoptive parents.
And how did they find adoptive parents for you? I mean, how do you go from a baby that's not supposed to be in the NICU to having adoptive parents? How does that connection get made?
Right. Well, and you were kind of referencing this earlier, and so we can talk about this here too. Not every abortion survivor is placed for adoption. And that's kind of a mind-blowing one for people. And I'll be honest, Conor, I mean, when I started to get involved in the pro-life movement and work with abortion survivors, my mind was a little bit blown of like, what do you mean you're not adopted? What do you mean you were raised by your mom who attempted to abort you? I didn't know that was a thing.
Well, I could see just in your story, Ruth, your mother, who was kind of forced into this by her mother.
Yeah.
Had Ruth found out 10 days later that you were in the NICU, she could have gone back and gotten you.
Yes.
Like, I could see that happening.
Yeah.
So that might be one scenario of how that works.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's the biggest surprise yet about Ruth's experience and mine, which is I now know that day at St. Luke's Hospital when I was delivered alive, she did not know. You know, I can only imagine the amount of distress she was under physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually after 5 days of an abortion that she didn't want.
How many years until she found out that you were alive?
About 30. I mean, over 30. And so...
Can you... Has she told you what it was like to learn 30 years later? That has got to be one of the biggest shockers a human being could ever experience.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my pain is for her, time and time again. And, you know, again, I'm grateful for that because it motivates me. It reminds me of why I do what I do, which is not just on behalf of preborn children, but on behalf of women like Ruth and men like Elliot and entire families. But, you know, there's so much discussion about abortion in our culture. And, you know, the voices of women who regret their abortion are often silenced. It's not just those of us who survive, you know, as babies who are silenced. It's women too. You know, we have a very clear cultural message about abortion. And so if your experience and voice doesn't match that, you tend to get quieted and pushed under the rug. And, you know, I know how much pain Ruth faced over the years. You know, she had guilt and, you know, I have no doubt she wished that things would have been different. And I have women like Ruth contact us all the time saying, can you help me find out if my baby survived my abortion too? We have a list of women who are looking for their child, hoping to be matched with somebody that we serve.
Wow. Did you find out how Ruth found out?
Yeah, it's complicated. You know, I didn't grow up knowing my story of survival. I think most families have no idea when and how and why to have that conversation. And after I found out that I survived, I went out on that journey to find my medical records, to find my biological parents. And, you know, I never thought this is what I was going to do with my life, Conor. You know, I've been a teacher. I have a master's degree in social work. I've worked in public and private practice. And I never thought, hey, I'm going to give all that up and I'm going to follow God on this incredible calling that really I know my life was spared for. But I never would have thought, hey, you're going to get up and you're going to carry that cross very publicly. Yeah. And as you do that, you are ultimately going to bring truth to your biological mother who didn't know. And probably, you know what, I don't think, Conor, that my biological father maybe even knew that I survived. I may never know that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But when I got involved in the pro-life movement, I had already tried to reach out to my biological parents. I found out who they were in 2007.
Which I want to come back to, and I want to learn that story.
Yeah.
But I kind of got out of sequence and asked about your mom.
Well, and it's life is not linear, right? I mean, our experiences aren't so linear. It's all over the place, and God, keeps bringing focus in all of those moments. But when I got involved in the pro-life movement, I had tried to reach out to them because I wanted them to hear from me before I ever shared this story publicly. But I also was never thinking, you know, I am going to get involved in the pro-life movement, start showing up on TV, and this is how her family is going to have to tell her, because it is starting to become very clear very fast that you can't keep that secret forever.
So one of her family members saw you and then told her.
Mm-hmm. And, I wish it hadn't been that way, Conor. First of all, I wish that they would have been honest with her from the very beginning, for her sake and for their sake, right? Keeping that secret just took the whole coerced abortion and threw gasoline on it.
Did Ruth tell you what it was like when she learned you were alive?
Shocking. Absolutely shocking, as you can imagine. And I think the fact that I was involved in the pro-life movement and very public, right? I think she felt scared that somehow I was the one who was supported and loved, and she was the one who had done something so wrong. But that came from a place inside herself, right? And it came, unfortunately, through her family, who twisted truth for so long of, you wanted, you wanted that abortion. And she's the one saying, I didn't want that. And so, yeah, I think she was scared and grateful at the same time. I think most of us can relate to that. When something happens, we're like, oh, thank goodness, but also, oh my gosh. And so it wasn't until 2013 that we started to communicate by email and started to kind of piece together her experience and what she knew and mine. And in reality, Conor, I, at that point, knew so much more about what happened than she ever did.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, because you've been researching it.
Yeah.
So take us back to you're adopted. Okay. Now we never got clear, like how did adopted parents get involved, because you didn't have parents giving you up for adoption. So somebody had to give you up for adoption, right? Doesn't that have to happen? Like the hospital doesn't just give you up for adoption. Doesn't somebody have to represent your mom or something? I don't know.
You would think.
I'm not sure how that works.
Right. And I think, again, this is where it gets really, it just makes you feel kind of that we have to face some of these details. But my parents adopted me. I was a ward of the state, essentially. My parents had already adopted a child from social services. My sister's 4 years older than I am. And then they adopted me. My parents had been infertile for over 15 years of their marriage. Of course, after 15 years, my little brother came along.
Seems to happen a lot. It
does.
Right? They adopt and then they have a baby. Yeah.
Yep. So my brother is 7 years younger than me. He was the odd man out at our house. But, my mom and dad, I think I told you and Ashley at dinner, I don't know how many families were contacted about me before my mom and dad. But I don't ever want to know, because I know that my mom and dad were called to be my parents. And so they traveled to meet me. I was still in the NICU, and, people can see photos of me. I think they're in the book. I was in the NICU. My head was shaved because I had wires, and tubes all over the place as a premature infant. And I was this tiny little thing. And my parents would tell you that the moment they laid eyes on me, they thought I was the most beautiful baby. And I'm grateful for that. But I look at myself and I see how vulnerable I was. And
that's you.
Yeah.
Kevin, we can maybe put these up later on the.
Yeah.
You should probably be looking at them right now.
Yeah. My parents could fit me in the palm of their hand.
Just a little thing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And so my parents knew. They knew that I had survived an abortion. They knew that the doctors weren't sure what my life was going to look like.
And you're 25 days old here. So you were even smaller.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness gracious.
But I love that my parents knew, right? They didn't know what they were doing with the baby who survived an abortion, but what they did know is that they could love me.
Yeah.
And to me, that is why I am who I am, because my life has been filled from the very beginning with people who loved me into life.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to be that nurse working in the NICU that rushes a baby, but every single one of us can love people. And that's how I was raised.
So you seem very grateful for your adoptive parents. I mean, you had good upbringing and everything. And
life wasn't easy.
Yeah.
Nobody's life is easy.
Right. So I guess we fast forward. You live a pretty normal life, I guess.
I thought.
Right. But then bring us up to where you learn that you were aborted. How old were you? How'd you learn? Like, what can you tell us about that? Because that's when it seems to me that your life would kind of stop being normal, you know?
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, everybody sort of has that pivotal moment in their life where they go, yeah, everything changed that day.
Yeah.
And everything changed that day when I was 14.
Now, you always knew you were adopted?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, always knew. Again, it was just the normal fabric of our family, to the point that when they had our little brother, we were like, what? Why?
Right.
Why did you do that? So yeah, adoption was normal for us. And then, you know, at the age of 14, my older sister faced an unplanned pregnancy, still in high school. And, you know, when our parents found out about that and that she wasn't sure.
You were 14.
Yeah.
So she was 18.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, our parents did something that I think was super, super courageous. They broke their silence on my survival, and they told her about it.
Told her about it.
Yeah.
Not you about it.
Right. Hoping that she would understand just how big of a decision she was facing in her life. And, you know, through that, I'm quite sure my parents learned how quickly two teenage girls can have a conversation about something.
Yeah.
You can relate to that?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so she didn't tell me that I survived an abortion. What she did say is that she felt she was more wanted by her biological parents than I was by mine. And I was thinking, what on earth? You know, this goes against everything in the way that we were raised. We were raised to know that we were equally loved, equally wanted, right? Where does this come from? And so here we're having this very heated argument. And she really, I mean, I can still remember the look on her face when she was starting to figure it out. And she said, "Oh, you don't know, do you?" And so she encouraged me that night. And she said, "You know what, wait up for mom and dad tonight and ask them to tell you the truth. And you'll see." And, you know, I can still remember the pattern of my parents' couch, right, sitting there waiting for them to come home from work. And, you know, I don't know, Conor, where my dad was that night or what time he got home. And, you know, I just think it's the way it was supposed to be, that it was my mom first. And so I sat her down and told her about what was said. And, you know, no parent should ever have to do what my mom did that night, which was have her heart broken. Having to tell their child.
You're 14. You're still a little girl.
Yeah. Yeah. They wanted to protect me.
How'd she tell you?
Carefully, tiptoed around the subject. And, you know, there are some things that I'll always remember. She said, you know, Miss, so I've gone by Missy in my family for a long time. As we talk about Katie Rose, I was Missy. And, you know, she said, "Missy, you know, there's no easy way to tell you this. We never meant to keep it from you." And she said, "You know, we love you. We're always going to love you." And the words just sort of fell out. She said, your biological mother had an abortion when she was about 5 months pregnant with you, and you survived it. My parents never would have known anything different than 5 months, because that's what was in the predominant part of my medical records. That's what was told to social services. Not that detail is important, but people always kind of wonder about that, right? Of like, but she told you 5 months. Yeah, because they wouldn't know any differently. And, you know, I wish I could say that when I heard those words, like, I embraced it all, right? This is my cross, I'm going to carry it. No, you know, to be 14 and to find out that you survived an abortion, it was like my first moment of hell. I did not want to be this person. I've never met anybody who wanted to be an abortion survivor, right? Sometimes people will say that, "Oh, you just wanted to be famous." No. If I could have lived a safe, comfortable, private life, that is exactly where you would find me. And yeah, no, nobody wants this. And, you know, as I was talking about that 8-year-old Gianna, and really the greatest threat to her life, it really is living in a culture that talks about abortion and treats it the way that it does. That's where my greatest internal struggle came from. Not that, yes, the people that I was raised to believe loved me so much that they gave me life and the gift of my family, and when they couldn't care for me, yes, that is an amount of the pain that I felt at 14. But my greatest pain came from acknowledging if abortion is a choice and a right, then what does that mean about who I am and where I fit in the world? And what happens when other people know that this is who I am? I am a choice that other people get to make. And you can hear it in my voice. You can see it in my eyes. That pain will always exist within me. It doesn't matter how healed I am. It doesn't matter how the Holy Spirit has emboldened me to speak truth in a world. That is a part of my pain. And I wish people could feel that for just a moment, because it's very humbling when you can push through to the other side of it and be healed. But for most people, you don't get that opportunity. You sit in that place for a long time.
Talk to me about how you help other people here. We'll return to your chronological story in a minute. Talk to me about how you help other people, quote unquote, heal when the pain still comes back all the time. So what is healing if you're still feeling all this pain?
Yeah, we walk people through. We have a specialized healing curriculum that I wrote, based on my work with abortion survivors for nearly 20 years, and also, relying on my clinical experience as a therapist. But it is about, acknowledging the pain. It's sort of like I often describe it. It's, using cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, which is, where did we begin to get this definition of ourselves, right? What is it that we say about ourselves? And where does that come from? And is there truth to that? And where is it not truth, right? Where is that something that is, a belief that other people had about you, or what the world says about the issue of abortion that then we internalize, right? And the message that we give ourselves. And it's really hard because you have to untangle all of that and see it for what it is so that you can integrate yourself. And so I often tell people, you're always going to have that little piece of you that remembers. My body knows, right? My body I've learned over 30 years of this, that my fight or flight has been a thing since the very beginning, right? I fought for my life. And so my body has run on that. And so I'm always going to have that piece of me, but you learn how to integrate yourself so that you can be as whole as you can be. And that piece is just a piece that is always there. And, I can go, if I didn't do this for a living, if I didn't do interviews, right, all of those things, I may not ever cry about it anymore, right? Because it's just that part of me that goes about in my daily life. But because I am constantly talking about it and working in it, it's always there. But yeah, when I was 14, right, I didn't want to be this person. I felt guilty for surviving. I felt such shame.
Help me with that.
Survivor's guilt.
Yeah, I'm not able to understand it, so.
Yeah, so folks who, say, survived 9/11, those folks, even though they were so grateful for their life, they also felt guilty of why them and not me.
Okay.
So we've lost well over 65 million lives to abortion in our country alone that we can put a finger on. And so you look at that and go,
why'd you survive and not all those other children?
Mm-hmm.
So there's survival guilt in that. I guess I
get and that. And even then the guilt of, why am I not missing limbs? Why am I not severely burned? Yeah. And again, I don't, that motivates me in my life.
Does it almost make you feel like you're not as aborted as someone else? It's a stupid way to say it again.
No,
but is that the guilt?
No, I so appreciate it. I think you have this way of saying things out loud that other people are thinking in their head.
I'm just the only one dumb enough to say it out loud.
No. I love it. This is like classic 101. If you could ask an abortion survivor, put it out there just like
gosh.
that. Yeah. You are exactly right. And And so survivor to survivor, we're constantly sort of looking at one another and we're like, am I survivor enough?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Did I survive enough? Have I overcome enough? Where do I fit on this measuring stick? But it comes too from our culture that is like, prove it. Right? You're not disfigured. You must be making this up. And we're like, well, if I don't look aborted, am I aborted? Yeah, it's a whole, the whole concept of identity is really, really big for abortion survivors. And, for me, that is what we're constantly working with. So we offer, healing support. We have a whole online community for abortion survivors. Our youngest survivors right now, Conor, are babies in the womb who have survived the first attempt to abort them.
Wow.
And God willing, we are always praying and working towards those mothers not aborting them again and again and again.
All right, footnote, talk about the abortion reversal, because that would fit what you just explained, right?
Yeah. Well, and so, for people to kind of understand the context of why our organization is important, and, trust me, I've had members of Congress who essentially are like, oh, thank you for sharing your story. There's only one of you. No, I'm not that special. I'm not. I am a bit rare, yes, but I'm not that special. And so statistically, we don't have good abortion statistics in the United States in general about the number that are performed. Then we don't have uniform reporting on the number of babies who survive abortions. We only have, I believe right now, 8 states who have abortion, like born alive infant protection. So in 2002, we saw that enacted, but that was a definitions bill. It had no teeth. And so there was no consequence for failure to provide medical care.
And that was just saying that if you survive an abortion, you're outside the mother's womb, doctors have to intervene and give regular medical care? Is that
right. It was a definition, right? Saying, yes, a baby who survives an abortion is
a human, has constitutional rights.
Right. Is
a person under the Constitution.
Right. But it didn't say, hey, if you don't provide that medical care, there's going to be a consequence.
Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying. That's why it had no teeth. I understand.
Yep. There was no. And so, even
would
after
it have passed if it had teeth?
No.
Yeah. So strategically, when you're dealing with pro-life legislation, do you agree with take a half a loaf and start working on the next half later?
Yeah, I think that's tough, right? We have a lot of discussion in the movement about quote unquote incrementalism, right? And for me, I call it principled incrementalism, which means, I believe every child should be protected. Mm-hmm. However, I also see it for what it is.
Right.
And
so we rejoice, but not too much, because we got a lot of work to do.
Right. And I wish that it was a slam dunk, but it's not when it comes to legislation. We have to realize who we have in office.
Yeah, and we've just had this, right? Roe v. Wade's overturned, great, but it still doesn't recognize these people as people.
Right.
It just made the decision maker about whether it's a person someone else.
Right. Yeah, and so I bring that up to say, there are so many pathways to an abortion survivor coming into the world. Back when I was born alive, it was those installation methods. Way back then, Dr. Willard Cates, who was the head of
installation methods.
So think saline infusion,
okay.
Other ways.
Infusions and things. Okay.
Yep. So that was the most common pathway to an abortion survivor back then.
I see. Okay.
And Dr. Willard Cates, who worked for the CDC, was kind of on record, even in the dreaded complications, said, we estimate about 300 to 400 live births a year after abortion. But he makes some pretty damning statements in that. And he says things like, we don't report it out because it's like turning yourself into the IRS for an audit.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy.
And so who's
going to do that?
Right.
Doctors are not going to self-report on this.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Right. And he made that clear of for fear of public clamor. And so there were no mandatory reporting of it. There's no federal born alive protection. And so the best way we can start to learn about the incidence of abortion failure and born alive infants is through other countries' data and through obviously the lives of abortion survivors that we serve. I mean, I'm sitting on a ton of information through the lives of those that we serve and the women who go through it. And so, in today's world, we have those babies in the womb right now, who we hope that mom doesn't keep aborting, those by and large are surviving the abortion pill failing. And so I want people to think about that. Women have no idea that their abortion pills might fail. That meta-analysis tells us, typically 1% to 7% of abortion pills fail. But again, that can be much higher. They tend to look at it sort of like a 3% failure rate. But women have no idea. And so a study came out last spring from the Ethics and Public Policy Center, and they looked at a sample of nearly 900,000 insurance claims. In those, they found that 1 in 19 women who took the abortion pill underwent a second abortion within 45 days.
That shows you the failure rate of the pill. That's incredible. That's incredible.
So I want people to think about that. And, this has really been my challenge to the abortion lobby. I mean, I've sat across Planned Parenthood in courtrooms even here recently. And, I've said, I would be willing to look at your reports if you would be willing to share them. Would you be willing to let women know that our organization exists when they need answers, when they need support, right? I mean, I know that I'm not going to get an answer back from them, but
when you sit across the table from Planned Parenthood and you look into their eyes and they look into your eyes, what do you see?
Sometimes I see hope.
Oh, I didn't expect you to say that.
I do sometimes. It doesn't surprise me anymore when I see it. It is different from person to person that works there. It's different from attorney to attorney. I know when I find myself in those situations with them, they have a job to do. And I'm just an obstacle that's in their way. But is it maddening? Yeah. Right? I am facing the giant who intended, right? It wasn't them, but they're the industry that ends the life of people just like me every day. And I am sitting across from them, fighting for truth, fighting for lives to be saved, fighting for women to have a different experience, to even simply be provided information about abortion in a truthful manner. It's sort of biblical in a way, right? When I find myself in that condition. I've also, I've had moments that I hold close to my heart. I've had some really bad experiences with even, folks from Planned Parenthood who wouldn't shake my hand. I've had Hollywood actresses who have been on congressional, subcommittees in hearings with me and have been very flippant about me in hearings and even after. And I think it's such a refinement to keep going, to not take it personally, to treat them with respect no matter how they treat me. But yeah, there's an element where I always kind of go, yeah, this is really surreal. I can't believe I'm doing this.
Do you know the name Dr. Peter Singer?
No, of course.
Yeah, Princeton guy, I think, and he's just like one of the most atrocious pro-choicers. I mean, he believes that philosophically that until you have personal consciousness, right, that you have no dignity, so you can commit infanticide up until like 3 months or something crazy. Mm-hmm. I don't know the exact dates. People in the comments can correct me, but I haven't read his garbage in 20 years. But I heard a debate between him and this like severely disabled woman who, I mean, her body was just the most contorted you can imagine. And she was like every possible medical thing had to be done to her to keep her alive after she was born. And the debate was between her and him. I mean, credit to him for coming and showing up. But the whole thing was like she was looking at him saying, according to all of your philosophies, I should have been killed over and over and over again until, I was a year old or 2 years old or something, because I was so underdeveloped and had so many problems. How can you look at me and say I should be killed? And he was like, actually exceptionally honest, and he was saying, yeah, I think you should have been killed. I mean, I don't think you had any rights until, I mean, at least it was an honest debate, but I found it staggering. And so I had that in my head, Melissa, because I could see you debating some Planned Parenthood person or like some abortionist saying, look at me and tell me I should have been killed. Like, tell me that I should not have survived this. I mean, that's more powerful than just, some pro-life talking head doing it. That's the power of your position here.
Yeah, and I think you've raised a really important point that we know to be true, which is I think it's very difficult to tightrope walk. How do we empower abortion survivors who have great needs and their moms who, when those stories are shared, the experiences of women who say stop their abortion, and that happens, women who stop their late-term abortion, they don't go back and finish it, whether it's because of physical pain or they, feel like God is talking to them, telling them to stop it. Or, there's lots of ways that I've seen this come about. But, the voices of those women, that there is something so powerful in that. And it is a very important place in the pro-life movement that has to be filled. I appreciate what everyone does, Everybody has their particular calling in the pro-life movement, but nobody can humanize abortion the way that we do.
Yeah.
And, it's really interesting because my question to a lot of people is, why do you have a birthday? And I have a day that I was accidentally born alive.
Wow.
Because then what is the difference?
Dang.
There's no good answer to that, is there?
So if I say, what's your birthday? You have your date, right? What, did your parents just give you that when you were a kid? Your adoptive parents, they just kind of told you your birthday? And did they get the right date?
They did. I mean, we can see that in the medical records. They saw it on the records.
So they used your proper date.
Yeah, they did. But I mean, again, those are things that people haven't thought about.
Weird. It's weird.
There's some abortion.
It's a birthday. We're celebrating the day that you weren't supposed to be here.
Yeah.
That's a strange thing in a kid's head.
Well, and again, this is where unless we really slow down and we think about it and we listen to the stories of abortion survivors and the women who are going through this, there are a lot of people in the pro-life movement who never really wrestled with, oh, you mean you guys experience pain? You're not just like happy? And people say that sometimes, well, I don't know what you're so upset about. Why can't you just be happy? Because abortion is abortion.
That's a really, I kind of want to smack the person who says that. I mean, what an idiot. I mean, smack them twice, one for being insensitive and one for being dumb. Sorry.
I know. But again, it just kind of reminds us how people think they've thought about abortion and they really haven't.
Right.
If that's your default response, you clearly have not thought about it as much as you thought you have.
Tan Books is here to help you become a saint. That's why we do everything we do. We publish thousands of titles, literally, that are specifically written to help you get to heaven. Everything from the lives of the saints to the writings of the saints, the greatest doctors of the church, the great spiritual masters, Alphonsus Liguori, St. Francis de Sales, and so on. So please come to tanbooks.com and find the book that God wants you to have right now so that you can get to heaven and be a saint for eternity.
But, even that line that you said of, can you look me in the eye? We did an ad back in 2020, early 2020, called Face the Choice. And the intent was for it to go to the Super Bowl. Pretty edgy, shot in black and white, featured multiple abortion survivors, some from around the world. I think our youngest at the time, Zachariah, was, he was probably 10 or under at the time. He survived abortion pill reversal, which I'll talk about that here in a second to close that loop. But, that was kind of the opening line. Can you look me in the eye?
Wow. So you're going to try to get this as a Super Bowl commercial. That is badass right there. Way to go, Melissa.
We didn't make it.
Why you didn't make
it?
We
didn't make it.
Money, or was it like they don't want to cover this?
Which do you think?
Yeah, they didn't want to cover this.
Right.
How much was it going to cost, by the way? Did you find out?
That time I think it was maybe $5 million.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
For how long? For how long of a commercial? Like 30 seconds or something? Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
Now, I don't want to spoil some things, but what I can say
I bet you could raise it. I bet you could raise that money for a Super Bowl commercial. I bet you could.
There may be that it's also another sport that we're looking at as well.
Okay. All right.
So, I mean, just stay tuned, obviously.
All right. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, I love when I can see that God is at work in things of like, maybe there was a better time for that ad than what we thought.
Wow. Okay.
But to talk about
back abortion pill reversal. Yeah. Give a shout out to my buddy Matthew Harris,
Dr. Harrison and his incredible family.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, abortion pill reversal is another pathway to abortion survivors. So, women who take the first abortion pill and, they regret it or they're looking for more information, whatever it is, when it is timely, they can reverse their abortion, meaning they don't take the second pill and they're given progesterone, which then, by and large, I mean, the efficacy rates of it are extremely high. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, the woman reverses her abortion, carries the baby, and baby is born. And so, yeah, abortion survivors are also coming into the world through that particular pathway. It used to be hundreds, and now we're probably thousands of babies surviving abortion pill reversal processes as well. So, in today's world, we have primarily abortion pills failing, then we have abortion pill reversals. We still have babies surviving later term abortions. I can say this to you, and I'm going to preface this by saying, be prepared. Babies are dismembered and still survive that as well. Yeah. And yes, it's a miracle. Yes, we shouldn't have to talk about it.
Can you meet these people?
I do.
Like you're missing an arm, missing a leg?
Yes. And that's usually a hint to people when they're like, wait a minute, right? This is not, my missing limb doesn't look like other people who have a genetic disorder that caused it. And so sometimes that's when people start to grapple with it. We have some survivors who have cerebral palsy as a result of either lack of oxygen or a significant head wound. One of my favorite, I mean, I love everybody that I know, but one of my favorite survivors is a woman named Hope. She's in her early 30s, lives in Florida. Hope's biological mom had an abortion at 10 weeks, and Hope survived it, but had a significant...
10 weeks?
10 weeks.
Wait. That's not like possible, is it?
Let's delve into some possibilities
10
here.
10 weeks?
So... abortion is not successful. What they don't realize is that she has a significant head trauma. So the abortion instrument caused a huge head injury. I can't remember what gestation Hope was when she was finally born. She was born prematurely. But when Hope was born, all those weeks, all those months after the abortion, she was delivered and scalp, was pushed back, huge head wound.
I see.
So when folks see Hope, and you can see her on our website and in other videos, Hope has sort of this pucker. Her family, her adoptive family, calls it her pucker place. They used to, and they still do. I think they kiss that place on her forehead, the very place that reminds folks what was done to her.
Amazing.
But so we see survivors of even, D&C, dismemberment, you name it. We see twins. So women don't know that they're pregnant with multiples. And so they leave a clinic or a facility believing that the abortion was successful.
Oh my gosh.
And they don't know for weeks or months that...
And there's still one in there.
Right. And I've read through medical records, Conor, where when they find out they're still pregnant, then in the record it will state, woman was counseled to have another abortion.
Yeah, imagine being that kid who grows up and realizes that mom tried to kill you too, didn't, killed your brother, killed your sister.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so those are different pathways to an abortion survivor. And so to kind of go back to that spot of how often does this happen, when we look at data, Canada has our best research. Mm-hmm. So in Canada, their failure rate, when you look at their abortion statistics, they consistently have about a 0.21% failure rate, When you correlate that to the United States, and folks can find this on our website, we list out the correlated data as well as other research studies. You look at that correlated data, and it would look like about 1,734 survivors of surgical abortions alone in 1 year in the United States.
Okay.
Then you add in, right, abortion pills failing in today's world.
Right.
Then you add in abortion pill reversal. You add in maybe women who are attempting to abort at home, because that was pushed when Roe was overturned. You know, you can see that on social media. I was following along with all of that.
Am I an idiot for not even knowing how that would be done? I don't want to go into it, but when you said trying to have an abortion alone at home, other than taking a pill,
right?
I don't even have the imagination to get there. So we'll just skip it.
Well, but again, you're raising such an interesting point, which is we have to face this. So, you know, sometimes people will hang the coat hanger, right, and go, well, never go back.
Right.
Did you know that Sylvester Stallone survived a coat hanger attempt to abort him?
Are you serious? Wow.
That came out.
Is he pro-life? Is he stupid enough to be pro-choice after this? Is he? I don't know.
Maybe you'll find out more soon.
Okay. All right.
Cristiano Ronaldo, famous
soccer player. Oh, yeah. Abortion survivor? No way. Are you serious?
But then I think it begs the question of,
really?
What does that mean to people?
The biggest names in the world.
What does that mean to people? I don't know.
Well, it unfortunately means more to people.
Yeah.
Because he's famous.
Right.
As if his life as the world's greatest soccer player and the most famous person on earth is more valuable than that 10-year-old boy that you just mentioned.
Yeah. So statistically, we are looking at thousands of babies surviving abortions every year in the United States alone. We serve abortion survivors around the globe. We have survivors in Australia, New Zealand, Germany, India, you name it. Our survivors come together. And to me, there's just something so incredibly healing and empowering looking into the eyes of someone who you can relate to, especially in a world that has been so affected by abortion. There's something really, really powerful about that.
Well, if Rocky's pro-life, then we're going to go watch all the movies again. Yeah. Okay. My kids and I, we're going to watch them all again.
Yeah.
I treat it as like American, like my kids are homeschooled. Mm-hmm. You are not educated unless you've watched the Rocky movies.
Darn right.
So,
kids in today's world. Know. I mean, my kids were like, Sylvester Stallone, who's that? And I was guys are killing me.
Right. No, my kids have seen it. Yeah.
Well, and when we look at data, I mean, I really do want people to go to our website. I often joke and say, print off these studies and throw them around like confetti. There were a couple studies that came out of Canada in recent years. They were looking at second trimester abortions. And in the sample of nearly 14,000 second trimester abortions, these were babies who had some sort of a health issue, right? And so think about this, the kind of the talking points that we carry in our culture. Oh, well, those babies should be aborted because of a health issue and they're incompatible with life. Well, interesting, in this study of nearly 14,000, 11.2% survived being aborted in a second trimester.
Wow. That's a huge number.
So I want people to just really start to question what they've believed about abortion and why, and then start asking those critical questions. What happens to these babies?
Right. Yeah, and seeing you or just seeing somebody else, like it doesn't rise to the level of, oh, there's a lot of survivors. But for some reason, this is the good thing about some celebrities. Like if you hear a celebrity, you're like, wow, then this must happen a lot.
Right.
Unfortunately, we go there, right? But that's the way our brains work. I mean, we
call it what it is.
Yeah, we have to see that survivor, but that celebrity. But as soon as you see that, you're like, whoa, you just named two of the most famous people on the planet. And if it happened to them, then it's happened to so many other people. It's almost like they're more real, which is dumb, but we're dumb. And so we need stuff like this. All right, let's go back. Back to the story. You were 14. Mm. Your mom breaks it to you. Your dad comes home later that night. How was that conversation with your dad?
I can even remember not just talking to my dad, but the next morning telling one of my best friends on the phone.
That was
what
my
I
next
found
question
out.
is like, you're a 14-year-old girl. Did you pick up the phone and call one of your best friends?
Of
That was my
course.
next question, which I
like-
assume you would, Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. So, but tell me about your dad too. I'm interested because
Yeah.
you told me last night how you had a very good relationship with your father.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think I'm so glad that you're asking that question because dads are so important, always have been, always will be. And, both my parents have filled very particular spaces in my life, but there is just something about the love of a dad that sustains you. And, I can remember that it's almost like battling against yourself, right? Of, man, I hate myself, but I'm surrounded by these people who are reminding me every day in both word and action of how valuable and loved I am.
All right. So, in regards to your dad versus your mom, your adoptive parents, not versus, but different. You just indicated there was a difference in how you felt this closeness to your father in this circumstance than in your mother, who I'm sure was great. But is it because you felt so incredibly vulnerable because you learned someone tried to kill you, and that your father, who represents some kind of protectiveness and overlooking, it's like you feel a little safer with the dad? Is that the dynamic at play in part?
Most definitely. And I think, we talk a lot about this in today's world, right? Of like our nervous systems and being able to regulate. And I mean, that's the world that I work in, right? With a background in therapy. But yeah, there's something about the consistency, stability, right? That a dad brings to the table.
Yeah.
And I knew that my dad doesn't have to speak a word, and I still know, right? That it is just, it is there. And so my greatest struggle was not related to them, right? It was against myself. It was against the world. And, there were so many things that I never told my parents, and I thought I would never tell the world. And my first book was very vulnerable. I can remember wrestling with editors who were like, there's more to your story. I'm like, nope, pretty sure I've talked about it all. And what I didn't want to talk about is my eating disorder, the alcohol abuse, the relationship choices I was making in a place of pain at the age of 14 that I never thought I would face at that age. And I never told my parents because I didn't want to be a burden. I mean, that's like, if you want to know one of the greatest struggles for an abortion survivor, it is, I don't want to be a burden. Because what happens when you're a burden? Oh, somebody tried to kill me because I was seen as a burden. So that is one of those like underlying currents that exists for us. And so, nobody would have known at the age of 14 that I had that bubbling up against me. But that is part of what our organization does as well, as we come alongside adoptive parents like mine long before that becomes an issue, so that we can say, hey, you know what? You can talk about this. You can be proactive. You know your child better than we ever will. But like, here's the tools for your tool belt as you're assessing your child's life and your family. You can talk about abortion. Here's how you can talk about it. You can talk about how babies survive it. Here are some resources. Here's a kit for your kiddo. And you know what? We're going to be here. We're going to be here to support you in the long term whenever you want to touch base. We're happy to meet with your young child and with you so that you can keep processing this. Because when I look back in time, Conor, that was the missing ingredient. Nobody had told my parents, hey, you know what? She might find out someday, and it's going to bump up against her identity and her mental health, and she's going to be at risk for things. And here's some warning signs to look out for, right? That, by and large, a lot of people still don't talk about it outside of us and then the therapists and folks that we equip to have these conversations. But that's how it can be different.
So the next day you call your friend. What was that like? Or how did you handle it socially? Did you tell a lot of people, a few people? Like, what'd you do?
I told very small group of people initially. And it's really interesting because, not long after that, so I went to a public school, and, within the first couple of years of finding out my story, I had to deliver a persuasive speech. You're never going to guess what I talked about. And folks still, right, 30 some years later will contact me and say, I can still remember you keeping a chair empty in the room and talking about what that meant.
Well, you had to give a persuasive speech on what? What was
on
it?
abortion.
For a public school.
Mm-hmm.
What side were you supposed to take?
I was pro-life,
Okay.
but I left a chair empty to show them.
That was just a technique you used in this speech.
Mm-hmm.
And you had another student take the other side? Was it like a debate or was it?
No,
it was just
nope,
you just had to give an address.
Yeah, but I still, for me, that is so meaningful that they remember it all these years later.
Yeah. That's good.
And, I think it was probably, life is confusing enough at that age, but I don't think anybody could realize the amount of struggle that I was facing against myself of like, yeah, you've told a handful of people and yeah, you delivered that persuasive speech and, yeah, probably people are going to be talking about that one for a while. But you can't measure how people are doing with it. And, for me, I was in more pain by the poor coping choices that I was engaging in, right? And that was, in many ways moving me further away from God. And for me, my faith is a huge part of my life. I mean, by the grace of God, I'm alive and I'm able to function the way that I do. But, God really saved me from myself. And I can remember waking up one day and just the continuous message was like, man, Melissa, I have more in store for you than this. Are you willing to accept that? Like, what are you willing to do? And I remember a day waking up and forgiving my birth parents. The message that I just felt was their life was forever changed by this too. Mm-hmm. This isn't just you. And so that's what really put me on the path to then looking for them and wanting them to know that they are forgiven. And, for me, and one of our parish priests talked about this, and I remember it too, which is right that forgiveness is a supernatural grace. It makes no sense. It's not us. And, for me, it is not a one-stop destination. I didn't forgive at the age of 16 and go, I'm great.
Right.
Life keeps happening. And, when our daughters were born and I had to look at my vulnerable infants and think, my goodness, my children never would have lived if that abortion would have been successful. There's a righteous anger that bubbles up inside of a mother. And then I forgive again. And that is that supernatural grace that I pray for time and time again.
All right. So you learn 14, you talk to a handful of friends. Your life's different. Kind of take us up to where you somehow start researching this and start learning information. How does that transpire?
Thank goodness for the internet, right? Kids these days who don't know what life was like before the internet. I mean, it was really interesting because, not long after I find out my story, we get the internet. And what I start searching is abortion survivor.
Really? Was there anything that early on?
Gianna Jessen was out sharing her story. So a lot of people remember Gianna. She and I are actually just months apart. We survived the same type of procedure. Has cerebral palsy.
Can you pull up that Gianna Jessen? I know that name.
Oh, yeah. And she's got a fiery spirit. She and I testified before Congress together back in 2015 about defunding Planned Parenthood. But that was my first time of laying eyes on another person like me. And that brought a level of healing, some empowerment along the way. And, started searching adoption forums and things like that of, right, how do you search for medical records? How do you find biological family? And, it took me searching from 19 to, till about 30.
So she's your age, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I know I had seen that name.
October Baby is a movie, if people haven't watched it. She sings in that video. And, it's a story of a woman who was a twin survivor. And it is a powerful movie. If people haven't watched it, I would encourage them to.
I've heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
October Baby. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're looking on the internet, you're finding stuff. What was the next big part of the story in the sense of discovery or whatever?
Yeah. So, really prayed over those 10 years of searching. Here I am, thinking, and people thought I lived a pretty normal life, right? She's got a career, she's growing a family. And, what people never could have understood is that all that time I was discerning what God's will was in my life. And, I would get a little bit of information about my biological family, and it was sort of like enough to keep me going, but it was never the full answer. And I'm thankful for that, because it was this opportunity to really learn to surrender and trust in God's will, and that it may not look like what my plans are. And for a lot of abortion survivors, that's like my greatest piece of feedback, which is sometimes you have to learn to live in peace with not knowing all the details, not having, this connection with your biological mom or dad, whatever it is. Like, you do have to learn how to live in peace no matter what. And so that's sort of what that period of time was for me, of how do I learn to live in peace? And, at the same time, I was starting to really discern whether I was called to share this story publicly. And, back then, really the only way for an abortion survivor to be known and get involved in the pro-life movement was to be a public speaker. Yeah. And I don't recommend that. I mean, now we launch survivors who have gone through healing and support with us, right? We do have our own speakers bureau called Real Abortion Stories, which is important to me, that those who can share their story and want to are given an opportunity to do that. But, back then that was the one way to get involved. And so I found in 2007 Feminists for Life. And that was that little 14-year-old girl in me that wrestled with whether I could be what the world said was a feminist and pro-life. And finding Feminists for Life gave me an opportunity to go speak on college campuses and educate women about our true feminists. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, they're pro-life. They were pro-life. It wasn't until the wave of feminism came in that equated abortion as a right? That's not true feminism.
Not pro-woman.
Yeah. And so for me, that was really a game changer to go, no, I don't have to give up that belief in the strength of women, the beauty of women, right? The calling of women. No, I don't have to decide between a woman and a child. This is not an either or situation. This is a both and. And so that's really how I got involved in the pro-life movement. And it wasn't long in the pro-life movement before I started to hear other people's stories. Mm-hmm. And I was starting to think, my goodness, I really am not the only one that it's happened to. And so I would do things individually. I would connect people with counselors. I would help them, write their story or get involved, whether it was at a federal hearing or a state hearing, doing whatever I could to help abortion survivors. And I would hear women's stories along the way as well. But I kept praying, like, Lord, send me the person, right? Send me the person or persons who can help this population. We have great needs, and there's nothing in the pro-life movement. And I seriously prayed that prayer until 2019, when I woke up one day and realized that it was me that I was looking for all along to help survivors. And that's humbling.
So is that when you started your organization?
It is.
And did you know everything that you know now? I mean, it was a process of you learning more, and eventually you met your birth mother, which I'd like to get to, and tell us about how kind of your personal story of discovery here kind of played itself out.
Yeah, and it does. And I think people can relate to this part, Conor, which is we can be going through things in our personal life and we're still achieving great things, right, on face value. And I think sometimes it's really hard for people to reconcile that, of like, oh my gosh, all these things were happening behind the scene while you were still, yes, right? These things can all happen simultaneously. So, here I am getting involved in the pro-life movement, giving up a career as a social worker, having children, writing books, and all the while starting to learn more about my biological mother's experience. And then starting to figure out, what does this look like? So, she and I started communicating in 2013 when our family moved to Kansas City, which is when her family reached out to me.
Okay, yeah, that's her family reached out to you because they saw you out there.
Mm-hmm.
Had you started to look for her? Like, had you found her? Did you know where she was? You knew who she was?
I knew who she was in terms of what her name was. I could not figure out where she was living, so I had not had any contact with her. I had found her family in 2007, and we corresponded a little bit.
Okay.
My grandfather,
And you reached out to them?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Sent them a letter letting them know that I thought that Ruth was my biological mother. And, essentially, right, I'm not angry, I'm not bitter, I'm alive and well. Would you pass along these messages to her? And her dad, my maternal grandfather, did send me a letter back. And, that was the last time I corresponded with them, was back in 2007. They let me know that they were estranged from Ruth, and so any messages would not be passed along to her. So you take from 2007 to 2013 and me trying to learn to accept that
right,
this is what maybe God's will is.
Okay, your biological grandfather, the guy who, with his wife, convinced your mother to
Correct.
abort, says, okay, we're estranged from Ruth, but did he say, oh my gosh, I'm shocked, I'm glad you're okay? Like, what else did he say other than like, we're estranged from Ruth,
Yeah, it was a pretty, it was a very measured letter. And I can understand that, of like trying to give me a little bit of information, but also keep some doors closed. And so
he knew you survived.
Yeah. And he knew that I knew. And that was essentially what the letter said, right? Is that, I know, your live birth was not the intention that day at the hospital. And, I'm grateful he told me some things about my birth mother and her family, things that any adoptee would have questions about in terms of health issues and, what people were like. But, he said in that letter that Ruth had never told anyone about her abortion. And, for me, that is sort of, when I look back on it, I think, what was that about? And maybe that was him saying, so she's never told anybody about it, so don't rock the boat. I don't know. But I am grateful that he responded. I think it took a lot of courage, considering their involvement in it, to send that letter. And, he exchanged some photos. And I honestly, Conor, I haven't talked about this in a long time. I remember a photo of Ruth slipping out of the envelope. And here, all those years, I had wondered about her, kind of dreamed that we looked alike.
Yeah,
I knew she had a twin sister, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there must be like 3 of us out there in the world that look alike. And I looked at the photo of her, and in my opinion, I look nothing like her. I look like my biological father to a T.
Okay.
But I remember just the sadness of thinking, I wanted so much to
at least have that connection.
Yes, exactly. And that's what it was about. It wasn't about, oh gosh, I want to look like her. No, it was, I want to see a part of myself in this other person, no matter what, right? No matter what the circumstance of me being born was, that is still the fabric of who we are. And I remember, as I was sitting in that place of pain and just thinking, this is not what I wanted. Like, I had that Holy Spirit moment where it was, the message was, Melissa, you don't look like her because you weren't supposed to.
Right. Okay.
You're two different people. But I think we all have some yearning within us, right, for connection. And that was a good reminder to me of that. So from 2007 to 2013, no contact with her family, no understanding of why they're estranged. And then 2013, we moved to Kansas City, and her family reaches out to me. And that's when I learned that the abortion was forced. I did not know that. That's when I learned the role that my grandmother played, that she's the one who demanded that I be left to die. And
can you tell us who was telling you these things?
One of Ruth's cousins, actually.
Okay.
And so that's how the line of communication was opened with Ruth, is that the cousin, starts to tell me some things, introduces me by email to one of my half sisters, Jennifer. And then Jennifer then connects me with Ruth. And as much as there was so much joy, I can tell you the amount of anxiety that I had was palpable, because I'm thinking I've been looking for this my whole life and now it's here. And it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard because abortion was hard. Abortion wrecked our lives. It nearly took mine. And here we are trying to repair something that tore us all apart. And we both are people who have lived on separate ends of the pain spectrum related to it. And that's also when I found out that she hadn't known all those years that I had survived. I had no idea. And so it's sort of like, right, we've been both wanting this for a period of time, me longer than her, but we like have all these bombs going off at the same time of, right, oh, this thing you didn't know and this thing you didn't know. And so we're like trying to come together while we're still in many ways being broken apart internally. And we spent about 3 years building communication and love and trust with one another. That first Christmas, I sent her photos of when I was a baby and my childhood, just giving her something that was taken from her. It was taken from her more than once, right? How many times was I taken from her? That's not her signature on my adoption paperwork. And I don't know that I'll ever know the answer on who signed me over. I don't need to know anymore. It's not going to change anything.
So Ruth, your mother, your biological mother, was the first victim, and you were the second, but she was a victim of this whole situation too.
Yeah, I was the intended primary victim.
Right.
She was a secondary victim.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's
I just meant that she was a victim first chronologically in the sense of she was attacked by her mother and she was forced into this.
Yeah.
Chronologically,
yeah,
she suffered and then she continued to suffer because you were taken from her. Somebody forged her signature, this whole thing, and then she had to live in the dark for 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah, she was very much a victim.
It's a staggering thing.
But again, I think
I think it's really admirable that you don't bear this grudge against her. I mean, to be able to see that she was a victim, it's quite compassionate. I mean, it'd be easy to just hate her guts for not being stronger.
No, man, she's one of the strongest people I know. It's just a different form of strength than mine. Mine is sort of lived out very publicly. My strength is. Hers is very quiet and private, right? Her strength, I think a lot of people's strength is overrated. It's that quiet, keep going every day, not fall apart.
Yeah. Now you're exchanging emails and letters and pictures with her for a number of years before you meet in person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how do you bridge that gap and say, enough's enough, let's meet in person?
Yeah, I think I could write a whole book of like, how to navigate awkward situations. That's a lot of my life. But yeah, my half-sister Jennifer, and by then I had also corresponded with my half-sister Sarah, and Ruth and I, we would text, we would email, we exchanged cards, all those things. But I really felt like we were all sort of like looking at the same elephant in the living room going, who's going to be the first one to ask when you're ready to meet? And, I think nobody wanted to upset the other person by asking or making them feel uncomfortable and force it. And so God just kind of gave me that spirit to be like, hey, I'm finally just going to ask. And I remember I was sitting on a flight and I sent it to my half sister, Jennifer. So I'm obviously the oldest on that side of my biological family. I'm the oldest sister, and then Jennifer and Sarah. And so, I had sent Jennifer a message and said, what would you think Ruth would say if I asked if she's ready to meet? And her response back in a text was, yes, all in caps. And so we met face to face for the first time in 2016 at a zoo, trying to, kids were involved, trying to make it as normal as possible.
Were your kids there?
One, our oldest was at the time. Yeah. The youngest was.
So you brought your kid, her grandkid.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Although, in some ways it was sort of like we had communicated for so long that we knew one another, right? People knew who one another was, but at the same time,
It's different.
it is
Person,
different. And I can remember when Jennifer texted that they had arrived, I had this visceral response
You
where
got
I
nervous
went,
or something?
oh yeah, I was like, I'm out of here, right? Like, I'm not doing it.
This just got real.
Yep, I gotta go. And it was sort of like, hey, nervous system, you fight or flight that likes to just get out of town. You're okay, right? You've spent 3 years preparing for this. And so I knew where they were, and we were walking towards them. And I'll never forget, right? We still go to that zoo, and I love it because I can walk past those points and I know, I was standing here when I got the text message they had arrived, and they were standing right there. And this is where I was walking towards her when I finally saw her for the first time. And there's where we stood when Jennifer was holding Ruth's hand and placed it in mine. And when Ruth looked into my eyes and said, I finally get to hold you. Yeah, right. Take my heart, split it in two.
Yeah.
And as beautiful as it was, Ruth would probably tell you I asked a lot of questions that day. I like to think that I didn't, but I mean, I still did, right? Just things that I wanted to know about my biological father and her and their relationship. And
so you walk up, Jennifer places her hand. Then you're holding her hand, and then you hug, or like, what is,
yeah. I crawled up on her lap.
I kind of want to see the movie, I mean, like what?
Yeah, she had said, right, I never got to hold you. And so then we hugged, and
Did she break down? Was she just like crying like
she cried,
crazy?
Yeah, she's a crier too. And I can still remember that look in her eyes. It was one that changed me, right? I mean, I have a lot of moments that changed me, but that moment of looking in her eyes changed me because I know my own pain and I know a lot of people's pain, but I could look into her eyes and I could see her pain very palpably. And the pain is not me. The pain is what was done to her and to me. And, I will never forget that. But I am grateful that I remember what her eyes looked like that day, and I don't see those eyes anymore. Her eyes are full of joy. And I want that for other people. I can't magically make people's babies appear after they've been aborted successfully. But I hope that I can lessen their pain.
Hey guys, real quick, I know you're enjoying this podcast, but there's somebody else out there that might really need it as well. So please take a second and think, family, friends, who is it that needs this particular content today? Take a second and send it to them. It's a great work of evangelization. Now back to the episode.
Your daughter's with you. How old's your daughter at the time?
Sorry, the kids keep getting older and I got to run the math.
Yeah, it changes every year. It drives me crazy.
Yeah, it really does. She would have been like 8.
Okay. Did she know your story?
You know what? She did. So
did she understand the import of this meeting?
She did.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, this. Kids are so radically different from one another. So Liv, she's Olivia. She goes by Liv. Liv has been falling asleep at my feet at podiums since she was a little girl.
Okay.
She first asked about abortion when she was probably about 3. She saw a photo on a truck at an event and said something like, who hurt that baby? And so that was sort of the first age appropriate conversation about abortion. And then fast forward, she was about 4 going on 5, and she loved fetal models. All right, every event we would go to.
All these pro-life events.
Absolutely.
You always have these little things.
The squishy babies, right?
The 6-week-old or what,
Yep.
you get different sizes. Yeah.
Well, there it is. So when she's 4 years old, what she wanted more than anything was the full-size fetal models, the 30-weeker. And we're like...
we're coming up on Christmas. Like a kid asking, Mom, I want Santa Claus to bring me a full-size squishy fetal model.
Yeah, take them out in public and tell me how it turns out.
Some kids ask for Barbie dolls.
Yep.
Okay.
And that was it.
Melissa's baby's asking for a that's
it
funny.
Was.
That's
and
funny.
Our local 40 Days for Life campaign that we were very connected to, they knew how important it was to her, and they bought her.
Wow.
We still have them in our family. They were passed along to our now 11-year-old.
Yeah.
But
you might live in a pro-life house.
Right? And some of her earliest... in Advent, we would do acts of service. And so she would go to the local pregnancy center and bathe her babies with their babies. They need powder, Conor. If they get grimy, you put powder on them. Yeah. Nobody wants a grimy, squishy fetal model baby. So all that to say, first of all, we experience a lot of joy in the midst of a lot of things. But so this is how Liv knew. She always sort of knew. And she was very much of the age where as things were happening, we would tell her parts, right, that were age appropriate. So it wasn't weird for her. I can still remember when she was probably in like first grade. And she came home from school one day and was talking about forgiveness. And she said, I know what that is. That's like you and your biological family.
Oh, wow.
And I was like,
you
know. And with our younger daughter, it's been different. So Ava was born with a rare genetic disorder that I now know people are told to abort. She's living a very normal, healthy life. It just means there's a lot of unknowns, a different roadmap. And she knows that we have a name for her roadmap. It means she's been on growth hormone shots since she was 16 months old. It means she goes to see a heart doctor from time to time. But it doesn't change who she is. Mm-hmm. And so her life was sort of just a bit different. We were battling to make sure that she was, eating and not having health issues. And so it looked different for her. And so she didn't ask a lot of questions. She's always sort of known Ruth being a part of her life. It's not different, right? She can't pinpoint a time. And so she didn't really start asking about abortion until really in the last few years. There was a day where she brought it up in the car. She said, why do I hear you talk about abortion survivors? What is that? And why are you one? And I remember glancing back in the rearview mirror thinking, here we go. And so gave her kind of that top line. And her response, she very much had a physical response when I had told her. Mm-hmm. But the physical response wasn't about Ruth at all. It was just that it happens at all. So the kids kind of found out in different ways and in different times. And I think that's a great example to people of, your kids better than anybody else to figure out when and how to have that conversation.
Yeah. Wow. So you meet Ruth at the zoo with your daughter. She gets to meet her granddaughter, which I that was probably very special for her.
Yeah.
You also met in person your half sister. Was she there too?
Mm-hmm. And her kids.
Jennifer and her kids. Okay. Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
So
family reunion at the zoo.
Yep.
Okay.
Union reunion, as I like to call it.
Right. Now, so now you met in person, and then did you keep up meeting in person, and that continues on till this day? Is that right?
Yeah. So what we learned very quickly when Ruth's cousin started to communicate with me is that there was another secret about Ruth that I didn't know and my adoptive parents didn't know, and that's that Ruth lived outside of the Kansas City metro.
Which is where you lived, right near
right.
where you lived.
Right.
All right, yeah,
And
that's
so does
kinda-
my half sister,
Oh man,
which is
you guys could have passed each other in the grocery store. Or
Absolutely.
something. That's weird.
But I also felt the same way about my biological father. So during those 10 years of searching for my medical records and for my birth parents, I ended up moving to Sioux City, knowing that that's where my birth mother's abortion had supposedly taken place. I always kind of wondered if they had doctored a little bit of that to cover some things up. But moved there. When Olivia was born, she was born at St. Luke's Hospital, the very same hospital where my life was supposed to end.
Wow. Okay, you gave birth. All right, just to
Right. Like, let that one sit for a second.
yeah, let it sink in. You gave birth in the same hospital that you were aborted.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to do it.
Yeah, I don't think well, not that I would have a baby, but I don't think I'd want to give birth in the same place I was
No.
aborted. I mean,
No, and that
this is weird.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean,
that's
it's
very
okay.
strange. I mean, of all the hospitals in the world,
Very God-willed. We can put it that way.
When you were, did you? Oh, wait a minute. I get mixed up on the timing. Sorry.
Yeah. So Olivia was born in 2008.
So you knew where you knew about this hospital.
Yes.
Before you went in to give birth.
I did, and there were other.
So you did. So you just said I don't want to give birth here. But I mean, so what'd you decide to do it? I mean, did you tell your doctor, hey, can you deliver someone else? Guess what happened here?
Yeah. Oh,
You know?
Yeah. I mean, yes, that was very much how a lot of those conversations went. Of like,
Wow.
P.S. We didn't know if there could be a complication related to that abortion that
All right,
would
okay.
rear its ugly head. So, right, that's become it's a part of my medical history in a big way.
But it's almost like for you get like giving birth there though kind of sanctifies this place where the evil was done.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like an exorcism on the place.
Absolutely. But there
So,
were,
for lack of a better term.
yeah,
you know?
no, my prayer life with God was really interesting because it was like, dear Lord, please, I don't want to die. I can't even drive past this place. I'll go to the other hospital. And so we went to our birthing class and literally sat there for hours and nobody showed up to teach the class. And suddenly when a nurse shows up, she apologizes and says, it wasn't bad weather. They just forgot to schedule somebody. Well, that doesn't go over super well in a room full of pregnant women, right?
Yeah.
But she very quickly said, but I promise I'll make it up to you. I've worked here since the mid-1970s.
Okay. All right.
And the dancing in my seat began.
Yeah.
And I started to think, could she, would she? And so I approached her that day
Did you?
in the bathroom
Uh-huh.
and said, I think you might know who I am. And so I told her that day, right? I survived an abortion back in 1977, and the tears just started to fall down her face.
Oh my gosh.
She said, of course I know who you are. She said, you look just like your grandmother.
Ooh.
Back then, I had no idea anything about my grandmother. And that is
because she had been a nurse there, so she would
Right.
have known her really well. It wasn't just
Right.
some grandma came in and out.
right.
She worked there. Wow.
And so here we're kind of departing together that day. And she said, we never wanted you to find out. The staff here, we never wanted you to find out. And I kind of looked over my shoulder and I said, thank you for that, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I, truly followed the heating of the Holy Spirit to give birth there, because that was not a coincidence.
Yeah.
And even after Olivia was born, right, I got to have all these conversations with just like even volunteers who would come in the hospital room.
Wait a minute. It took me a second to process this. Wait, they knew who you were before you told them, hey, I was aborted here in 77?
The nurse
Just
realized
because
it.
she recognized you when you came in? Is that how, like, she recognized, like, you look like your grandmother?
She couldn't pick me out of a crowd.
Okay,
no.
when you telling her
Right.
I was born, then she's like, oh, now I know who you
Oh
are.
yeah, 100%.
Okay.
100%.
Because this had
knew.
had this just haunted that whole staff all these years?
I think so.
Okay.
I think it has to.
Okay, so it's not that they knew who you were before you told them
No.
that. You said, I was born here in 77, and she went, I know exactly who you are. And about bingo, you look just like your grandmother. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Wow.
Olivia's born there. And what I had learned in 2007 is that my birth father was living there in Sioux City, Iowa. So I'll connect that dot for people who maybe come in at this point of our interview. So I moved to the city where my birth father lives, give birth at the hospital where I was supposed to be aborted successfully. And then I end up moving to the city, the metro area where my birth mother and one of my half-sisters lives.
Yeah. God's just made this web of pretty cool stuff. So you give birth there. You have a relationship to this day with your birth mother.
I do. So, we met face-to-face in 2016, and we get together as often as we possibly can. I mean, if you asked my kids, they would say, Grandma Ruth gives the best birthday presents out of anybody.
So they call her Grandma Ruth. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I think you also told me that both your mothers have become friends. Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that, because that's pretty remarkable.
It's incredibly remarkable. The very first time I met Ruth, she kept saying that I was better off placed for adoption than ever raised in her family. And that was tough to hear, because for me that meant more loss for her. And what I came to recognize really quickly in those conversations was that she understood how I would have been treated in many ways, and she wanted better for me than that. And she is, from the very beginning, talked about my parents with such incredible respect. It's always been, right, I am so thankful for your mom and dad. Let your mom and dad know how much I appreciate them, how you are who you are because of them. And so I have that conversation with her all the time. And then I have my mom and dad who are like, we've always loved her, right? And the more we know, our hearts are broken even more for her. And let Ruth know how much we love her.
Yeah. So sometime you're like, we need to get you in the same room.
Right.
Yeah.
And so here I am, sort of the middleman, and I am very much a person who, I have to say I have good situational awareness, right? I'm constantly reading the room and gauging where people are at. And so trying to figure out, right, when is the good for my mom and dad the same as the good for Ruth, and find then that good time to bring everybody together. And, the harder our parents get, I think the harder that becomes. And so I finally in recent years had just said, I think we can do this, right? I think we can match everybody's schedules up and make it work. And I can remember the first time I took my parents to meet her, and the amount of tears and, right, not sorrow, they were tears of joy.
Yeah.
But it was just sort of this natural thing. My mom sat down at a table together, and the rest of us went to other table. And it was like we just gave them space.
Give them time, yeah.
Yep. And so that day forged their friendship. And so now, still to this day, I know exactly and my mom would say that have you talked to Ruth lately? Because Ruth and I were texting the other day. I'm just like, of course you are. Of course you are.
Yeah.
And so now they talk. Sometimes they talk on the phone more than I talk on the phone. They are truly friends.
Wow.
And to me, that is something that not only brings me joy, but brings me a lot of strength.
Yeah.
But I know that not everybody is going to be given that opportunity.
Okay, so that kind of does that bring us up to kind of the current day? I mean, It's a remarkable story. And as we kind of begin to, come close to wrapping up, I mean, because that it's a remarkable story, but you have all these other things, like you started this organization. Yeah. Would that be the next logical place to kind of go and to say, okay, you've lived through all these things, the personal witness is incredible, all of this example of forgiveness and compassion, to where your two moms are talking. I mean, it's remarkable. All the investigative work you did. At some point, you started giving public addresses or anything, but then you found this organization, and kind of take us there. We talked about a little bit in the beginning, but what else do you want to say about the organization right now? And then what are your plans for the future, and where's all this go? Like, how does this remarkable story play out over time?
Yeah. And I think it looks different from person to person what we do with what happens to us. In 2019, the reason why I even founded the organization was because that's when New York lit up pink celebrating abortion. And I can tell you that the number of abortion survivors and adoptive families that were reaching out to me was so high. I could not feel it alone anymore. And so that's when we became a nonprofit and started, the healing curriculum, started the online community. But our online community has grown. So now we have an online community where women whose abortions fail, or they stop them, or they reverse them, those women have their own community. So when pregnancy centers are serving women in today's world whose abortion pills fail, they can refer them to our community, right? That is something we offer that nobody else in the pro-life movement around the world offers. We do the same thing for adoptive families. They have their own community where those adoptive parents, yes, we are the formal support that gives them resources and information and connects them and comes alongside them for as long as they need us. But then they become that informal support network to one another saying, hey, man, as an adoptive family, how have you navigated this, right? What are you going through? Tell me more about that. So that is part of what we offer. We also do tons of education, right? Just educating everywhere from parishes to policymakers at the federal level about the incidence of failed abortions, the impact on women, the impact on surviving babies, what people's needs are. And really, when we're doing that, we're humanizing abortion time and time again. We also have our Speakers Bureau so people can have somebody come speak and tell a story that is somewhat like mine, but also different in its own right. And then we also have what I call our storytelling campaign. And so that is called My Body, My Voice. And people can go to mybody-myvoice.org and come face to face with more abortion survivors who, through sharing their story, are really challenging that predominant cultural narrative of my body, my choice. I mean, what about my body? What about my voice? So as a woman, I supposedly have the right in our culture's terms to have an abortion. But if I hadn't survived it in the first place, I never would have lived to have any other right.
Here you go.
Yeah. And that story in particular, Karen's story, is one of my favorites. She just turned 80. Karen was born in an abortion clinic after her birth mother's abortion failed. 80 years old, Conor. Wow. Would you have ever thought about that one?
Wow.
And so that is our hope, is to really challenge the cultural narrative to abortion and be a little bit hard-hitting with it. It doesn't mean that these aren't still beautiful, compassionate stories, but our very existence challenges the narrative on abortion.
I meant to ask you like an hour ago, just somewhere, we mentioned it briefly, but failed abortion, or kids survive an abortion and they go home with the same mom. Mm-hmm. I don't think, has anyone outside of this world ever considered that? I mean, that is such a strange thing to me. What is that like? And do they tell their kid when they're like 5, oh yeah, by the way, I aborted you, but you survived, so I brought you home. What is that conversation like? What in the world?
And it's different from survivor to survivor and family to family. Again, right, what we are trying to do, and I would say we are doing, is make this a positive experience. And to make it a positive experience, we have to reach the woman whose abortion failed so that she can be healed and whole, so that then she can have that conversation in a proactive, age-appropriate manner with her child and raise them in such a way that there's a healthy relationship. Because what I can tell you, Conor, is historically, because nobody was filling this space in the pro-life movement, because they couldn't, right? It's no fault of the pro-life movement. Nobody else could have heard the stories, understood the magnitude of it, right? Wrestled with it the way that I have. When we haven't done that, what I find is that by and large, it is a struggle in those families because there has not been healing. And so they do not tell the child in a positive manner. Sometimes it comes out sideways. A lot of times it comes out sideways, and in ways like a child who survived that abortion, raised in their biological family, is told from an early age, nobody wanted you. We didn't.
Who would tell them that?
I know, but think about
like older siblings or what?
Older
Who is mom and dad tell them that? I mean, what?
Sometimes.
Man.
And I've had survivors whose biological parent have tried to kill them after they survived.
What?
And it sort of harkens back to what you and I talked about, which was the satanic nature of abortion, but also just the incredible wounds that it carries and the generational patterns that are lived out. And, I don't share this, right? I share it so tenuously because sometimes people will go, well, isn't this why abortion is better? No, it's not. What it means is that we need to do more to reach women and families and bring about healing so that this isn't a pattern that's lived out. So I see in families what has happened when women aren't reached and families aren't served, right? There's abuse and neglect, and there are issues with bonding and attachment that then impact people throughout their life. I shared with you and Ashley, we found in our population of abortion survivors that there are abortion survivors who have abortions themselves. Sometimes before they knew that they survived an abortion and sometimes after.
Yeah. And I kind of equated that to like, a kid who's sexually abused grows up and sexually abuses somebody. I mean, that's an age-old story.
Right.
So I guess if you're a victim of abortion and you never get any kind of proper healing,
right,
you just pay it forward in a negative way.
Right. And that family, by and large, abortion has become the fabric of the family, and so you default to what you know.
Right.
Right. You just this is what we do.
We did broach last night at dinner a little bit. What do you know about the demonic side of, I should say, more specifically, the satanic side of abortionists? Because we do read on occasion that Satanists become abortionists, and the abortion of that baby is a child sacrifice to Satan. Mm-hmm. A lot of people maybe think what I just said is hocus pocus nonsense, weird rad trad stuff. Mm-hmm. But no, I think it's real. I think that really happens.
Well, and we see though cases too where they're getting involved at the state level, right? Trying to overturn pro-life laws and protection. Like, why are they getting involved if this isn't a thing?
The Satanists.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think the story that I told you guys last night, that is my greatest description of it, which is, I've laid my hands on abortion clinics, even after they've closed. And I can tell you that I will always have that energy that I can feel within me that I will never forget. This does not play itself out to the magnitude that it does without that being a part of the equation.
That's creepy. Just to be clear, like, you don't have any problem believing that Satanists perform abortion as child sacrifice?
No, I don't have any problem believing that.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, granted, it's not to paint it with a broad brushstroke and say that that's every circumstance.
No, not
right?
at all. No.
But yeah, for us to say that that is not ever a thing would be very short-sighted.
Yeah. Wow.
And then you see the impact on maybe people who didn't go into it in that manner, but say abortionists who are so forever changed by that. I don't know if you even recognize the name, but I referenced Dr. Klopfer in that. That was an abortionist in Indiana who a number of years ago, they found hundreds of baby bodies, aborted babies in his trunk. That's not normal.
Yeah, what was he doing with those?
We don't know. I don't know that anybody will ever know. Why did Gosnell train his staff to snip the spinal cords of babies like me who survived? Mm-hmm. It's not normal human behavior.
Yeah.
And then we're sort of culturally gaslighted because when we ask the question, say about Gosnell, and they go, "Oh no, he's just an outlier."
He's an outlier. Really? Wow. Okay. We've been going on 2.5 hours.
It's 2.5.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, it's glorious, but I just kind of want to begin to wrap it up. I mean, I could go longer,
Right.
but this is staggering. I mean, I haven't had a podcast yet when I was like, what? As often, but I'm a normal person. And so it's hard for me to grasp the abnormalcy of everything involved here, which just shows the evilness of it, but also the staggering, silver lining is not the right word, but grace that gets infused into all of this human tragedy.
Yeah.
Divine providence is remarkable. 3 years from now, 5 years from now, what do you want your organization doing? What do you define as success? Helping people, but like, do you have put that a metric on that, or what do you hope your organization practically is able to accomplish or do? Maybe like have a commercial at a massive sporting event, something like that. But help me see where your organization's going from here.
Yeah, and I mean, for individuals, our key metric is that they can identify that their well-being is improving.
Good.
Physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So we have scales of that.
That's awesome.
But for me, and I can say on behalf of our team, one of our key metrics that we're tracking is we want to radically improve the amount of survivors that we serve. So at this point, we've served over 1,100 abortion survivors since 2019. That's the tip of the iceberg.
Tip of the iceberg.
Right?
Okay,
so to see an exponential jump in the number of survivors and mothers and adoptive families we serve, that's a key metric. But in order to get that key metric, we have to be reaching into our culture with the truth about abortion and abortion survivors so that they can know they're not alone and start to walk out that connection to us. And sometimes, again, that's a hard metric to have, because I also know that sometimes people aren't going to want to share their story with us. So simply having the resources on our website and tracking the amount of visitors and what they're downloading is a huge piece of that puzzle.
And that probably tells you if they are a survivor, or at least they're close to a survivor.
Right.
Depending on what they're downloading or whatever.
Right. Yeah. And so those are some of those key metrics. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, for us, the biggest pillar right now is education and outreach. And so, yes, doing a big, our footprint is we reach over 10 to 15 million people a year through our various projects and platforms, which is huge.
That's huge.
But there's still more ground to cover. So a big campaign, for a sporting event is a really important part, that first pillar of education and outreach that then fills all the buckets of the other key metrics. And ultimately, my goal would be to not have to have this organization. Mm-hmm. That's my end goal. Because it shouldn't have to be.
That might be the most powerful vision statement I've ever heard, is our goal is to not exist.
Yeah.
That's remarkable. Most places have to define their success as perpetuating what they do.
Right.
And you get to define your success as making your services extinct.
Right.
Because it's no longer needed.
Yep.
That might be the most beautiful vision statement I've ever heard.
Well, from you, that means a lot.
I love vision statements. I help people write them for their families and businesses. That might be one of the most incredible. Well, I don't know how to end this other than say thank you. Your story, it's amazing. It's inspiring. You're a walking, talking role model for compassion and faith and hope and entrepreneurship. I mean, you've done it all. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It really does mean a lot.
I hope my audience. I started with the website because this is different. It's not just another pro-life movement, which all those organizations are important, but this is different in kind, not just degree. And so I hope my audience checks it out. We'll make sure that all the links are in the show notes. But if Conor, Gallagher, or Tan Books can, be of service to you, your organization, you just ask, and we'll do what we can. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks guys for checking out the Conor Gallagher Show. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, or comment, or whatever you got to do to support it. And I appreciate that very much.